Picture this. 60,000 years ago, a group of early humans huddles around a fire. Lightning splits the sky. Thunder shakes the ground. And for the first time in the history of our species, someone looks up and whispers a question that would change everything. What is doing this to us, and why? That single moment of fear, wonder, and desperate need for an answer is where the story of God belief actually begins. And it's a story far stranger, far more human, and far more urgent than most people realize. Because the truth is, ancient humans didn't invent gods out of ignorance or stupidity. They invented gods because their brains were doing exactly what evolution built them to do: survive an unpredictable, terrifying world. Anthropologists and cognitive scientists now believe the roots of religious belief stretch back at least 100,000 years. Long before writing, long before agriculture, long before anything we'd recognize as civilization. And it starts with something called agency detection, a mental shortcut your brain uses right now every single day without you even noticing. Imagine you're an early human walking through tall grass and you hear a rustle behind you. You have two choices. Assume it's just the wind and keep walking, or assume it's a predator and run. If you assume wind and you're wrong, you're dead. But if you assume predator and you're wrong, you've just wasted a little energy sprinting for nothing. Over hundreds of thousands of years, natural selection favored the humans who jumped to conclusions, who saw intention and agency in every shadow, every sound, every flicker of movement, because those were the humans who survived long enough to pass on their genes. And this hyperactive agency detection device, as scientists call it, didn't just help us dodge lions. It rewired us to see invisible actors behind every unexplained event. The storm wasn't just weather, something angry caused it. The drought wasn't just bad luck, something was punishing us. The good harvest wasn't chance, something was rewarding us. And just like that, without anyone sitting down and deciding to invent religion, the human mind was already primed to populate the world with unseen, intentional beings. But agency detection alone doesn't explain everything, because there's a second piece to this puzzle, and it's just as fascinating: death. Nothing forces the human mind to confront the unknown quite like watching someone you love stop breathing and never move again. And archaeologists have found burial sites dating back over 100,000 years at places like Kafse Cave in Israel and Skul Cave nearby, where early humans were buried with red ochre pigment, with shell jewelry, with tools placed carefully beside their bodies. Think about what that means. These weren't just corpses being disposed of. These were people being prepared for something, sent somewhere, cared for, even in death, which tells us that tens of thousands of years before the first temple was ever built, humans were already grappling with the terrifying idea that consciousness might not simply end, that something of a person might continue on. And once you believe the dead persist in some form, you're only a short step away from believing they can still watch you, still judge you, still help or harm you from wherever they've gone. And suddenly, you have ancestor worship. You have spirits. You have the first fragile scaffolding of organized belief. Now add fire to this equation, because controlling fire didn't just keep early humans warm and safe from predators, it gave them something no other species had ever had: hours of free time after dark, hours with nothing to do but sit together, stare into flames, and talk. And researchers studying modern hunter-gatherer groups, like the Juhuansi in the Kalahari Desert, have found that nighttime conversations around the fire are dramatically different from daytime conversations. Daytime talk is practical: who found food, where the water is, what needs fixing. But nighttime talk turns to stories, to myths, to explanations for why the world is the way it is. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner spent years recording these fireside conversations and found that storytelling around fire activates imagination, empathy, and shared belief in a way that daylight simply doesn't. Which means the campfire wasn't just a survival tool, it was quite possibly the first church, the first classroom, the first stage where gods were born through story and repeated until they became real in the minds of an entire community. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Because belief in gods didn't just emerge from fear and grief, it also solved a massive social problem that early humans faced as their groups grew larger. When you live in a band of 30 people, everyone knows everyone. Everyone can watch everyone. And bad behavior gets punished immediately by people who see it happen. But once human groups started growing into the hundreds, and eventually thousands, once strangers started interacting with strangers who might never see each other again, a serious problem emerged. how do you stop people from cheating, stealing, and lying when no one's watching? And this is where researchers like psychologist Ara Norenzayan, author of the influential book Big Gods, argue that belief in moralizing, all-seeing gods gave ancient societies a genius solution. Because if everyone believes a powerful, invisible being is watching their every move and will punish wrongdoing even when no human witness is present, people behave better even in total privacy. And Norenzayan's research across dozens of cultures found a striking pattern. Societies with belief in punishing, moralistic gods were able to grow larger, cooperate with strangers more successfully, and build more complex civilizations than societies without that belief, which suggests something almost unsettling, that the invention of watchful gods may have been one of the key ingredients that allowed human societies to scale up from small bands into the sprawling cities and empires we associate with ancient history. Think about ancient Egypt, where the concept of ma'at, cosmic order, and truth was enforced by the belief that your heart would be weighed against a feather after death, and if you'd lived selfishly, your heart would be devoured and your soul destroyed forever. Or think about Mesopotamia, where the god Shamash was believed to see everything under the sun and personally guaranteed that contracts and oaths would be honored. Or think about the way nearly every ancient culture, from the Aztecs to the Norse to the early Vedic peoples of India, developed some version of divine judgment tied directly to moral behavior. And this pattern shows up again and again because it worked. It held societies together in a way that fear of getting caught by other humans simply couldn't match. Of course, belief in gods also answered questions that early humans had no other way to answer. Imagine living before science, before any understanding of astronomy, biology, or meteorology, and trying to explain why the sun rises every single day without fail, why the seasons change in a predictable cycle, why some years bring abundant crops and others bring famine, why a child is born healthy while another is born sick, why volcanoes erupt, why the earth sometimes shakes beneath your feet. And without any framework of natural law, the most logical explanation available to the human mind was intentional action by powerful beings. Because in a world governed by relationships, where everything that happened around you was caused by the will of another person, it made perfect sense that the sun, the storm, and the sea might also be persons, just vastly more powerful ones. And this way of thinking has a name in anthropology: animism, the belief that natural objects, animals, and phenomena possess a spiritual essence. And animism is now widely considered the oldest form of religious belief on Earth, predating organized gods and structured pantheons by tens of thousands of years. Evolving gradually as human societies grew more complex. Agriculture emerged around 12,000 years ago, and the sky spirits and animal ancestors of hunter-gatherer bands slowly transformed into the sun gods, storm gods, and fertility goddesses that ancient farming civilizations depended on to explain, and hopefully influence, the harvest that determined whether their children would eat that winter. And so, when you pull all of these threads together, the hyperactive agency detection that made every rustle in the grass feel like it had intention behind it, the confrontation with death that demanded some explanation for where consciousness goes, the campfire that gave humans the first quiet hours to imagine and share stories, the desperate need for moral order in societies too large for everyone to police each other, and the total absence of any scientific framework to explain the natural world, you start to see that the belief in gods wasn't a mistake, wasn't a trick, and wasn't a sign of primitive stupidity at all. It was one of the most successful survival strategies our species ever developed. A beautiful, haunting, deeply human response to living in a universe that offered no answers on its own. And honestly, when you really sit with that, it makes you wonder less about why ancient humans believed in gods, and more about how much of what we still believe today, the rituals we follow, the meaning we search for, the fear of the dark, and the comfort of community, is still running on that exact same ancient software, quietly shaping us long after the fire has gone out. So, if this made you see your own mind a little differently, hit subscribe, because next time we're going even deeper into the ancient world. And trust me, you don't want to miss where this story goes next.